Everyone, thank you for attending. It's possible other classmates might jump in as the meeting goes on. Um, I think the most important thing that I wanted to remind you of is that if you have a question and I'm talking, feel free to type it into the chat. Okay, I do try to check the chat as frequently as I can, especially if I am going through this, well, especially if I'm lecturing about something, I kind of get caught up in what I'm doing. So you don't want to forget your question, good place to put it, and it's an opportunity for me to kind of review. If you could put on your videos, if you feel comfortable doing that, great. I would love to see your faces, but there's no pressure with that at all. I understand the circumstances. This is designed mainly to be a question and answer session. I'm happy to review any elements of lecture or the upcoming paper assignment that's due. So why don't we get started? Any questions that you have about essay number 1, the film analysis?
I have a question.
Yes, Leon.
I knew that there was an assignment that we had to turn in, which was a rough draft.
Mhm.
Is it, if I turn that in late, am I gonna get 0 credit for that?
Well, remember that the rough drafts are not graded, so not turning in the rough draft isn't going to negatively impact your grade. What turning in the rough draft at this point would allow is for me to provide you with some feedback. I have been going through and providing some quick feedback to your classmates, looking at their problems and their thesis statements. I've mostly focused on the introductions. I do keep a record of who submits the rough drafts. And as you may remember, I do have a redo policy. And part of getting being able to do a redo is completing a contract. And I might include in a contract that the next paper you have to write a rough draft for, right? Because I do think that rough drafts are crucial parts of the writing process. So, Leanne, I hope that answers your question. It's not going to hurt your grade if you don't do it, but it could help because it gives me something to look at.
Okay, because I wanted to submit one, but I didn't know if it would, like, I don't know. I just didn't know if it was like any use if I submitted one because I have one
Sure.
done now, but
Right.
I just wanted to know if I could still submit it either way.
I would encourage you to submit it. I would like to see what your writing is like right now, what the draft is. Um, I don't really worry about grammar in the rough draft. I mostly am just making sure, I'm trying to see how you're doing with the introduction. You know, I think that's the hardest thing for us to write at this stage. I'm particular about what goes in the introduction, and it's worth 30% of your paper's grade. So any feedback you can get on the intro, I think is good. And have been prioritizing providing some feedback on those intros. So the decision is yours. I do think it's worth submitting it. Let's say we're in the same situation in the future. Just send me an email and say, hey, professor, I submitted the rough draft late. Would you be willing to look at, the intro or any other part of it? Okay. And then I'll respond with joy and I'll say, yes, gladly. Okay. So good question. Thank you, Leanne. Okay. Other questions about the assignment? Are we all good on knowing what needs to be done in this paper?
I have a question.
Yes, Andrew, go for it.
I've noticed that you annotated our rough drafts and you highlighted some sentences. What
Mhm.
does that signify?
Well, you should be able to put your cursor over the highlights and see my comments. For each highlight that I completed, or that I made, I made sure to, sorry, let me see if I can do the live transcript here. I made sure to put in a comment in there. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so are you able to see my comments, the highlights?
Um, I'm checking on view feedback, and as I pull my cursor over the highlighted portion,
Mhm.
it doesn't reveal anything. Maybe I need to download the copy or.
I haven't had good experiences with downloading the PDFs. They don't come up in the, I don't believe the comments come up as directly connected. Andrew, we can set up a separate time and I can kind of
Okay.
walk you through it. I am pretty sure though that I submitted a video for you all on how to access the feedback. So let me see if I have that in the modules, because that would be a waste for both of us. you wouldn't get the benefit of the comments that I provided, and I would have wasted my time providing information that you don't get to use at all. All right, so let's see. I'm not seeing it in week 3, week 4. You know what I might just do is let me go to a different class. Andrew, I will try to find that resource and share it with you all as quickly as I can. But while I'm looking for that, does anyone have any other questions about the essay?
Yeah, can we go over sorry,
No
how do I
worries.
incorporate quotes?
How to incorporate quotes?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. All right, so Sophia, I'll get to that question in just a second. Actually, Sophia, would you mind typing that question into the chat? Because I just found the resource that I wanted to share with Andrew and with all of you, actually. I don't want to forget your question. All right, so Andrew, this is a video that I posted to a different class, and because they have a different set of assignments than you that required it sooner. But now that I've given you all feedback on your rough drafts, it's important for you to be able to see how to access that feedback.
Well, I'm able to access it right now.
Good.
I just made a new tab and everything appeared.
Excellent. All right.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to share this YouTube video, which kind of walks you through how to access it. Andrew, thank you so much, though, for bringing this to my attention, that you did not have this tool. And I'm going to put this in our chat right now, and I'll get to see Sophia's question and one other, Jenny's. Okay. Jenny, would you mind if I answered your question for the whole class? Okay. All right, great. The YouTube link that I posted to the chat will take you to that walkthrough for how to access feedback, to how to access comments that I've provided on your rough drafts. I will make sure to post that to our Canvas site. Okay. And Sophia, you had a question about incorporating quotes, and Jenny, you look like you have a similar question. If we are quoting a scene in the movie, how should we cite the evidence? Very good. All right, so when we are citing evidence for a film, I want you to include the time code, okay? I'll write that here into the chat. So you would use parenthetical citation, and in the parentheses, you would put something like the time code, which would be an indicator of the hour and the minutes. And depending on, I'm not going to require the seconds, but I think you could put that in there too. I'll look into the MLA guide to see if they have a standard requirement for it. But at the very least, the hour and the minutes. So let's say I was doing Django Unchained, and I was looking at that scene in the middle of the movie where Django pulls the man off of the horse. I think that occurs around an hour and 6 minutes or so. Let's say that it does. Okay, well, I would either use objective description to describe the scene, and I would close the objective description with the parenthetical citation, or I might quote something that Django says or one of the other characters, right? And then I would close the quote with the parenthetical citation, and I would include the time code after it, okay? Jenny, that's an excellent question. I am going to make a note of that, and I'm going to find a resource that I will share with the class because I believe the examples that I've shared with you so far have been from classes with text-based, language text-based texts, right, to look at. So one of the voice threads was about, was looking at how a student was incorporating scholarly sources with Toni Morrison's Beloved, with their analysis of that. Toni Morrison's Beloved is a novel, not a film, right? So I understand that the formatting of the evidence is going to be different, but I did not provide you with a resource for that. So I will make sure to do that. Parenthetical citation, include time code. Now, you are only using one film in your analysis, so you do not need to include the title of the film in parentheses, nor the director's name or anything like that, because you're only using one primary source, right? If for some reason you were using multiple films, then you would have to distinguish it, which film you were using in the signal phrase or in the parenthetical citation, but that's not a problem that we have to worry about here. Okay. Let's see. Now, Sophia, you had a question about incorporating sources or adding quotes. Was that right?
Yeah, but it fell more into what Jenny was asking. So
Good, excellent. Then what I want to do is remind you all of that voice thread that I posted either last week or the week before about incorporating sources, scholarly sources. Here we go. So let's take a look at this one. While the example that I've included here is a student's analysis of a piece of literature, a lot of the same principles of formatting still apply. All right, and let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit more. There we go. By the way, I do think that the introduction that this student wrote is a very good one. This is a good example of an introduction for you all to follow. Remember that your intros need to have context, problem, and response, and a lot of my comments were guiding you to develop those elements of the introduction. But let's see how the student incorporated a quote. And it looks like there's an example of one in the middle of the intro, which isn't something that I usually advise. But let's see how they did it. Through SETI, Morrison demonstrates what it meant to be a mom in maternity during the 19th century. Okay, now for some reason this student chose to do an ellipses. That is not appropriate here. What I would remind you of is the signal phrases handout. They have written a complete sentence. So when you write a complete sentence as a signal phrase, you finish with a colon. And then you weave the quote into it. You close the quote, and then you add in the parenthetical citation, in this case, the author's last name and the page number. So for any of the scholarly sources that you use, like let's say you were quoting Patricia Hill Collins, you would put Hill Collins and the page number that you found it on, okay? All right. So in general, this is a good source to look at. Let's see if they do provide some other quotes that would be useful. Yeah, I'm not so happy with how they have included the parenthetical citation here. As far as weaving a quote into a sentence, though, let's see what they did. Sethi reflects on how women were moved around like checkers, end quote, parenthetical citation, all her life. The parenthetical citation should go after the last word of the sentence, life. They did weave it effectively into the body of the sentence. Just some small formatting issues, okay? As far as formatting goes, your best bet is to use that resource, the signal phrases handout. As far as examples of how to weave evidence into your paper, this voice thread gives a pretty good example of how to do that. The signal phrases handout gives several examples too. you basically can use a colon or a comma to introduce a quote. As far as the kind of evidence that you all are using in your paper, you are either using objective description, or you are using quotes from the film. So you are either describing a scene and then you would analyze the details of that scene, or you are incorporating a quote from the film. Either way, when you have concluded the objective description or the quote, you'll need your parenthetical citation. That's how I know the evidence portion has concluded. And then following the evidence is your analysis. Okay, that's the last bit of the support sandwich: context, quote, analysis. Please do not end paragraphs with quotes. You should be finishing with your analysis of those quotes. Remember, it's your paper, you get the last word. I need to see how you're interpreting things. Okay. Sophia, did that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see where the signal phrase is. You know what? Rather than waste time looking for that now, why don't I make a note and I'll send out an announcement after our meeting that follows up with where these useful resources are. Okay, good. Other questions about the essay that's due on Friday? If there's nothing else, if you all feel pretty good about where we're at with the requirements, then we can end the meeting there. Let's take one last look at the prompt, right? So my recommendation to you is to take this prompt and to turn it into a checklist, okay? So simply copying and pasting the different elements. I think certainly this question here is something you need to make sure that you've answered very clearly. I have encouraged you all to be more specific than simply stating gender, which is kind of abstract. If you were to focus on masculinity or femininity, that would be one good way that you could make it more specific. And if you were to follow Patricia Hill Collins's lead, then you would be looking at a particular kind of masculinity or a particular kind of femininity. And she gives us 3 categories for each of those. Outside of that major research question, and you are making sure that you're writing an analysis about one of these films, you've got these different requirements that need to be met. One thing I want to say that we haven't gone over in detail is this this term here, claim of fact. Okay, I'm saying that you need to write a claim of fact thesis. If you're answering this question here, does the film reinforce conventional views of gender, masculinity, femininity, or does it resist them? How so? Be specific. If you're answering that question directly, you will write a claim of fact thesis. Claims of fact thesis statements assert that conditions exist, existed, or will exist. They don't make value judgments. Your job isn't to tell me whether you like the film or not, or whether it's a good film or it's a bad film. Those are claims of value. Okay, we're not dealing with those things in this paper here. What we're looking at are the signs of gender. We are trying to see the visual rhetoric of this film and what statements does this film seem to make? What ideas does it seem to support or resist? So if you answer this question here, when you get to this element, you'll be okay. All right. When I looked at the rough drafts, for the most part, I think that the class did a really good job of writing claim of fact thesis statements. And if I saw something that seemed to be a claim of value, I made sure to let the student know that it needed to be adjusted a little bit. to focus more on the signs of gender rather than on how effective the film was. All right, so I would simply copy and paste these bullets and just make sure that you've gone through and checked off each one. All right, and you should be just fine. I'm going to check the chat one more time, see if any other questions have come up. Jenny, I'm reading your question right now. Would it be okay to say the film reinforces and resists the conventional views, or should we mostly focus on one view? Jenny, that's an excellent question. There is room for ambivalence or ambiguity here, okay? So yes, you can say that the film does both, especially if you have evidence for it doing both. What I would encourage you to do then is to further interpret that ambivalence. What can we make of it? But to simply respond to your question, yes, you can acknowledge that the film reinforces and resists the conventional views. If possible, identify, see if you can categorize or make a generalization about which conventions seem to be reinforced and which ones seem to be resisted. If you can get a little bit more specific, that would be great. Excellent question. Yes, it can do both. All right, so make a checklist, make sure you've met all the requirements. As far as the 5-page minimum goes, it is top to bottom, okay? Once it's 5 pages, it is 5 pages if you reach the bottom of the 5th page, not one line at the top of the 5th page. The works cited is required, and that does not count towards the page total. So what you're looking at probably is a file that consists of 6 pages, the final page being the works cited. Okay, any other questions before I wrap up here? All right, Stella, if we have more than 5 pages, is that fine? Yes, and I'm glad you asked that because I did post an announcement at the beginning of the semester. It's probably been forgotten by now, but it's frequently asked questions. So let's find that, and that'll help us answer your question. Let's see if it's there. I wonder if I deleted it. Okay, well, Stella, the short answer is yes. If you were to write 6 pages of text, then you would be doing just fine. You are allowed to write 1 more page than the required length. So 5-page paper, if you were to go to 6 pages, that's perfectly fine, okay? It becomes a problem when you are going well beyond the required length. If you were to write a 10-page paper, that would certainly lead to point deductions, okay? If you write a 6-page paper, that's fine. One page more than the requirement, okay? There's a skill here, though, that's being assessed by staying within that range, within 1 page. And that is, can you identify certain points that are more important than others? Can we form an argument rather than an information dump? So I would like you to stay within that range of 5 to 6 pages. Okay, great question. Anything else before we close out here?
I have a question.
Yes, Andrew.
Apart from what you highlighted in our rough drafts, is there anything else we should focus on as well?
Well, I think, okay. With 3 minutes, I don't have time to fully answer that question, so I'm going to give you the Cliffs Notes version of it. Look at the page from this week's module about understanding how essays are graded. Okay, pay attention to where the majority of your points are. I'm going to pull up that page right now if I can. There it is. Okay. You can see that your paper's worth 100 points and the math is pretty simple. The percentage directly correlates to the point total. Your thesis, sorry, your introductory paragraph is the most valuable paragraph. It's worth 30 points all by itself, okay? After that, you've got all of your body paragraphs, okay? Those body paragraphs make up the body grade and the support grade, okay? So that's where you should be spending the most time, making sure that you are using the structures that I've asked you to use. Your introduction has a context, problem, and response. Your body paragraphs are directed by a topic sentence claim, followed by a reason and 2 support sandwiches. If you are consistent about that and you are responding to the prompt, the question that I've asked, you're going to get a good grade on this paper. Okay. So I hope that that helps. Okay. Just simply do a checklist for yourself, right? Look at your intro. Do you have a context, problem, and response? To the best of your knowledge. Look at your body paragraphs. Do you have a debatable claim at the beginning? Do you have a reason and 2 support sandwiches for each one? And if the answer is yes, then structurally, at the very least, you've got a solid paper. Okay. So that's my recommendation, Andrew. Students obsess too much. I shouldn't say obsess. I can't speak with certainty about that. I think there's an overemphasis on the conclusion. Okay. You do need a conclusion. It's worth 5 points though. Okay, so keep that in mind. So don't worry about putting the perfect bow on this paper. Make sure that you follow my guidelines for how to structure a conclusion. You need to reinforce your thesis, review your major points, and then consider the consequences of what we've learned here and why this matters. But don't worry about it being perfect. No matter what, the most you can get out of that concluding paragraph is 5 points. Whereas your intro, the most you can get is 30 points. All right. That's a lot more valuable. Okay. All right. So unfortunately, that's probably the last question that I'll have time for. I've got to run off to another review session right now. Thank you all though for your time. I've got some follow-up to do, including the frequently asked questions announcement, which I'm disappointed to see has not been listed here in your announcements page. So I'll make sure that that's available to you all. I will find a resource, or I will remind you of certain resources that you do have that will help you format this paper regarding signal phrases, and I will send out that video to everyone about how to access the feedback that I just provided on your rough drafts. All right, thank you all again for your time, and I look forward to reading your papers. If you have any questions, good luck. Okay, you just, sorry, if you have any questions, email me. With that, I'll end by saying good luck. All right, take care, everyone.